Right, we are recording now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Venice branch of the Los Angeles Public Library. My name is Rumi. I am the acting senior librarian at this branch, and I am extremely excited to host another virtual program as part of a series that strives to discuss the use of poetry in maintaining mental health during this pandemic. Today, we're talking about unity. Given the social and political unrest today, many Americans left feeling bitter, angry, and divided. In today's workshop, Dr. Ellie Zarrabian will discuss the philosophy and poetry of the 13th century poet, philosopher, and mystic Rumi on how to create the essence of unity in one's life in order to promote better mental and emotional health. We will have a survey at the end of the presentation. I will share the link in the chat box, and I will also email you the link. We value your input. We appreciate your participation in that survey so we can improve our programming and we can hopefully include the topics that you are interested in our future programs. But before we start, I'd like to offer some additional information about the framework this program was developed in. In fact, this is our fourth program in a series that focuses on the links between poetry and mental health, especially during these difficult times. The framework is called the Persian Poetry Forum of Los Angeles. Our vision in this programming framework is to encourage the understanding, interpretation, and discussion of the deeper meaning of Persian poetry in day-to-day life for the promotion of mental and emotional health and well-being. This is a forum for people of all backgrounds to come together and learn. The emphasis of the group is to build bridges, engender dialogue, and create a sense of community and well-being in Los Angeles area by sharing an interest in Persian poetry. With that, it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker. Dr. Ellie Zarrabian is the founder and spiritual director of the Centerpiece Foundation and the Centerpiece Project since 2010. A former adjunct faculty at Santa Monica College, Department of Behavioral Sciences, and a drug and alcohol counselor. Today, she uses her 20 plus years in education and health to help people develop healthier lifestyles. Since COVID, she has been working online with people both here in the US as well as internationally. She is also the mother of two beautiful teenage girls, and when she's not working, she spends her time traveling with her partner. Dr. Ellie, welcome. Thank you for taking such a unique approach to discuss such an important issue in our society. We are all ears.
Thank you, Rami. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me tonight. A big shout out to all of you and my two daughters, Leia and Sarah, who are also joining us. This is their first time seeing their mother in a professional setting, other than just being at home and cooking and cleaning after them. So it's great to have you all here. Yes, so I met Ramin and Dr. Rahmi last year when I joined the Farsi speaking book club at the West Los Angeles Public Library. And we got together shortly after we met and we said, why don't we create a forum where we can build bridges, bring people together from both East and West and enjoy Persian poetry, share Persian poetry, and even personal poems that people have written in service of health, healing, wholeness, and friendship. Soon after we started, back in February when we gave our first workshop, COVID hit and we had to stop. And we didn't do anything up until August when Rumi contacted me and said, well, what do we do? And we suggested that we start doing this online. And we had our first workshop in September. Or actually, I'm sorry, was it October? I think it was in October, right?
It was October, yeah.
That's right. So we had the English-speaking one, and then we have the Farsi-speaking one with Dr. Max Rahni. That's coming up in 2 weeks. And we hope to continue offering you these programs through the public library. So again, I'm Dr. Ellie Zarrabian. I've been doing this work for over 20 years where I effectively combine psychology and spirituality in service of healing and wholeness. I work with people both here in the US and also around the globe, all the way from Indonesia to Africa, to Canada and Europe. Tonight, I'm especially happy to be with you, given what's going on in our country. Last time we talked, we were prepared for this, and we thought this would be a wonderful time for us to present this talk. And this is the first of its kind, and I'm very excited to be here with you, and I think you're going to enjoy the next hour hearing about this information. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the PowerPoint. And you should all be able to see this. Okay. Okay, good. And just to recap a little bit of last week or last time when we met, we talked about the whole concept of polarity or duality in Rumi's teachings. And I gave a whole lot of examples of what that looks like in his poetry, what that looked like in his own personal life. And then I tied that in with an actual client of mine that I worked with to talk about love from the perspective of Rumi's teachings and philosophy. So this time around, I'm going to do the same, talking about unity. But before I do that, I want to invite you all to sit back, relax, and for just the next hour, if you can, if you will, put aside your ideas of right and wrong and meet me in a place where I believe, and you might too, where Rumi and Shams, his teacher, would hang out. So it's an invitation to leave behind where you normally rest, where you think with your mind and have a sense of right and wrong, and to enter this new area for the next hour where you listen with your heart. So in last week's or last month's discussion in talking about polarity being central to Rumi's philosophy, I talked about how these Sufi poets like Rumi, there's Hafez, there's Jami, Sanaib, we have so many of them in Iran, come from this perspective. And I talked a little bit about how Sufism is the mystical tradition of Islam, as is Kabbalah to Judaism and Gnosticism to Christianity. And in a Sufi mysticism, there's always an interplay between the two forces, the two polar opposites. And we call this duality the interplay between the lover and the beloved. It's a divine love affair. But of course, it can also be interpreted into a human love affair. So you can read it from the perspective of two people being in love on this plane, as well as looking at it from a more spiritual perspective. And I talked about how the interplay between these polar opposite forces is so powerful that the coming together of these two forces is often what's needed to create something truly magnificent. And I gave an example of nuclear fusion, two opposite forces coming together in the most powerful way. Also the example of sperm and egg, and also the example of love. And so we carry that further to polarity with what's happening in us today and in our country as a whole. So here was the depiction of polarity, and then a more artistic form where opposites come together. Okay, so Rumi himself was riddled with a great deal of polarity. Last time I talked about the polarity in his personal life, with what happened with his own teachings when he met his teacher, and the years that followed, and the difficulties that he had in losing his teacher, and where that sent him into. And this time I'm going to talk about polarity in his environment and tie it with what's going on today. So simply because of its geography, or where it's located, Iran or Persia has always been a place that's been very desirable because of where it's located, and also because of its natural resources. And so from the beginning of time, if you read Iran's history, it's always been a place where a lot of conquering and occupation has happened, time and time, generation after generation. It's been a place where it's been riddled with conflict historically. And it's political, social, and religious turmoil that's been going on for many generations. So this is not anything new to that part of the world, unfortunately. And so 800 years ago, Rumi was experiencing the same thing as many people are today in that part of the world. So the polarity that Rumi was confronted with around him in his environment was that he had great disdain, like his teacher Shams, of people who would take mystical knowledge, which he believed was falsely acquired, and use it to their own benefit. He called these fake clerics, and his work is riddled with a lot of disdain and opposition towards people who posed as clerics, but used the knowledge for their own benefit. He was vehemently against them, as was Shams. They both were against people who took to religion in order to control the masses. And Shams was very outwardly clear about this disdain he didn't care, and he would let everyone know when he ran into one of these fake clerics. So there's a great passage where Shams was looking, before he met Rumi, he was desperately looking to find this individual that he was going to study with and work with. And he was traveling all over the region at the time, trying to find this special person. And so he would ask people if they know of anyone like that, and people would point to such and such cleric, such and such noble person, etc. And Shams would go visit them, and he would test them out to see if, in fact, these people were for real. And so here in this story, Shams is appointed to go to Baghdad to visit this famous sheikh by the name of Mirmani. And as he enters the room to visit this particular cleric, he notices that the cleric is looking down into a bowl of water. And Shams looks at him and says, "My friend, what are you doing?" And the cleric says, "I'm watching the moon in this basin. I'm looking at the reflection of the moon in this basin." And Shams is absolutely disgusted by this and turns to him and says, "Well, if you don't have a boil on the back of your neck, why don't you just lift up your head and look at the sky? There you will see the moon as it is. Why are you looking into a basin when all you're really doing is depriving yourself of what you're actually seeking?" So this was very common to Shams. And when you read this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the interpretation of this passage. In Sufism, there, like most sacred texts, there's two ways of reading his poetry, Rumi's poetry. One is the outward, the manifest content, which is called the exoteric, and one is the more deeper meaning behind it, or the esoteric. So if you look at the more general interpretation of what is going on here, is that basically Shams is calling out this fake cleric and strongly opposing this person being in a place of power and misusing that power for basically smoke and mirrors to fool the people. A more esoteric explanation of what is going on here, which is again very typical to Rumi's teachings, as both an outward and deeper meaning behind his work, is that what he's saying, what Shams is saying, is why look outside of yourself at a reflection of something that you're seeking inwardly, when all you have to do is to look up to the heavens and actually see that which you are seeking for yourself with all your own senses. Meaning, you don't have to look to the outside in order to just find a reflection. All you need to do is to look where the actual thing is and experience it for yourself. So this is very paramount to Sufi teachings, right? That there is no intermediary, no person in the middle who shows you where to go, what to do. All you need to do is to seek out the beloved on your own. Okay, so of course, Rumi was his teacher and followed in the teachings of Shams. And here he has, he's alluding to a similar concept when he says, "He who attaches his heart to a plank of wood for the fear of drowning is no traveler, but a man revolting against his essence." And so again, if you take the more esoteric or deeper meaning behind this, a plank of wood could mean anything from superficial ideology, So if you attach yourself to superficial ideology, if you attach yourself to false preachers, if you attach yourself to materialism, whatever is outside of you for the fear of not drowning, in fact, you may not drown, but you're drowning your essence. Okay, so in similar vein as Shams, he's saying the same thing. So both of these individuals are activists in their own way, teachers and mystics, of course, as well. And through Shams, Rumi had discovered that love was indeed love of everything, person and creature, was the key to liberation on earth. And that's very much part of, again, Sufi philosophy, is that love is the way, it's the path, and it's the goal. It's the destination, it's the path and the goal. And he goes on again to say, just to reiterate what I said in the previous slide, in order to live truthfully or to rid yourself of falsehood, you do what you have to do to follow the direction of your own calling to the higher power. And it's not anything that resides within you. No provisions, you don't need any provisions or a path for your journey, meaning attainment of anything outside of you, power, wealth, status, etc. So if any of that is what you're seeking, then you're not really living a truthful life. So this is very radical for the time. You have to understand these are pretty strict times, and if you know anything about the Islamic faith, the use of such metaphors, especially the use of metaphors of alcohol, spirits, drinking and getting drunk, and rejoicing in the presence of the divine sommelier or tsari, these are all very sacrilegious concepts. These are very radical concepts, even to this day, let alone 800 years ago, when the ruling class was a theocracy. So for many of us, we read these poems, have been so for centuries, right? And we're very used to hearing Rumi talk about a state of drunkenness. For example, here he says, when the drunken man has gone astray from the tavern, he actually becomes the laughing stock. He becomes the fool. So if you stay drunk, you're actually closer to God. But if you become sober, you've lost your way. But of course, there's again, a general understanding of this. You can say that he's just talking about being jolly and merry and having a good old time every day as a way to rebel. Or you can look at this from a more esoteric perspective to say that this is actually being drunk on the wine of the beloved. So it's through spiritual connection that he has, which he refers to as being drunk. And sobriety are those who are going along with the status quo, leading a more pious life according to religious teachings, not necessarily the path of the heart. And on the second one, he says, hearken to the words of the sage, which I believe he's referring to his teacher, Shams, who lived in seclusion. So again, not someone with a lot of pomp and circumstance. This is not a person who's out in the world being revered and worshipped by people, but someone who lives in seclusion and is considered a sage. He lays his head in the same place, and that's referring to the prayer position. If you know of how Muslims generally pray, they put their forehead to the ground. So this is referring to worshiping or praying is the same place that you become drunk. Okay, so again, this is very sacrilegious to bring these um, two metaphors together, you know. But he did it. And to this day, I think all of us who have studied Rumi and who talk about this work wonder, how is it possible that such a radical man who was so outspoken, both him and his teacher, were able to continue to write this material without it ever getting destroyed? How is it possible that his work was not destroyed? How is it possible that Rumi was not destroyed? And not only that, how has it been that his work has united people in Iran? And I'm going to talk about that. How is it that this work has continued from century to century to unite people globally? And his message has remained intact for 800 years. Now, I don't know if you've ever written anything magnificent, but if you have, how long has it lasted? How long has it been well read? You know, how is it possible that someone's message can get passed down for 800 years? This is poetry. So the reason that this is possible, the reason for all this to have happened and the works to still have remained intact and for us to still be having access to his teachings, is primarily because of the process called alchemy. And in Farsi, it's kimya. Alchemy is an ancient medieval practice which was done by alchemists in both East and West. You hear about the alchemists in the church, and you hear about alchemists in medieval times in Persia, where they were, in a way, chemists who were focusing on working in laboratories in order to turn precious metals or base metals like lead and copper into precious metals like gold and silver. This was their focus. They would work in a laboratory day and night to see if they can turn these base metals into precious metals. Well, many of these alchemists were part of a spiritual tradition, and eventually their work would become more esoteric instead of exoteric. Instead of focusing on the outside, that work became applied to what's going on the inside. So they're turning their base emotions, such as anger, jealousy, envy, hatred, hostility, into higher states of consciousness like joy, love, peace, unity, etc. So Rumi writes quite a bit on alchemy, and here's an example of what he was talking about. Through alchemy, you can transmute and turn a river of blood into the river of life. Through alchemy, you can transcend your limitations and see your enemy turn into your friend. And beneath all that duality, what finally remains is unity. Such is alchemy. Okay, so I'm going to take a little different turn here and give you a little bit of cultural insight, because I think then this information will make a little bit more sense in terms of how Rumi is viewed today in the East, and also to help create more of a context for our friends here in the West. So despite what mainstream media tells us here in the US and what you see in the news and on TV, Iran is actually a very diverse country. Okay, although Muslims are the great majority in Iran, we have a large contingency of Armenian Iranians, Jewish Iranians, Baha'i Iranians, Zoroastrian Iranians, Assyrian Iranians, and many, many other subcultures. Each of these subcultures have their own religion, they have their own dialect, they have their own traditions and customs. Okay, so two Iranians could be as different as two people from East and West. But what keeps us united as a people is, I believe, what Rumi and other Sufi poets like Hafez have given us, which is a unified Iranian national identity. At the end of the day, you can be from many different backgrounds in Iran, different cultures, but you pull out your Masnawi or your Divan, you will inevitably get 2 or 3, 5 or 10 people come sit around you and share their joy of poetry with you, okay? Just look at us. Those of you who attended last week, you saw myself, Ramin, and Dr. Rahni come together to do this work. Okay, from the outside, if you look at us, you may think, what could the three of us possibly have in common, right? 3 different generations, 2 different language proficiencies in Farsi and English, different upbringings, different gender, different backgrounds, different faiths. What could we possibly have in common? It's this work that whenever we come together and study poetry, we immediately transcend our differences and come together in a place of belonging and connection. And that has forged our national identity. And I do believe that the Iranian people's ability to stay afloat and united through centuries of turmoil, warfare, death, destruction, and occupation is because we have learned to speak this language of love. Now in Iran, first generation Iranians, they take this poetry very seriously. It's taught in school since they're very young. So by the time students graduate high school, they are pretty fluent in reading these ancient texts. And they're able to converse and they're able to sit with each other, recite poetry, and even give an interpretation of the deeper meanings of these poets. And that's what has kept the people together. Okay, so here in the West, we are facing a lot of turmoil, a lot of polarity going on in this country right now, right? Political, social, environmental, economic, and health. So this is not really, it's new to many people here in this country, but if you talk to people who come from these native and more older countries, they generationally have been through this stuff, right? For a lot of Iranians, this is not something that's new. I myself ended up here because of all this that I experienced as a child in Iran. But it's very new to here. And I would say that what we can take away from all this is that, first of all, we're really grateful to have people like Coleman Barks and Robert Bly and Andrew Harvey who brought these works to the West. So we get to actually read their material here in the West. And look at what it's doing here in this room, just with the 17, 20 of us, right? It's uniting us as a people, whereas normally we would never come together, East or West, East and West, and talk about unity and love. So you see, even under such settings, when we bring these poets, we're automatically creating a place of love and devotion. That is the power of such work. We're grateful to these translators. At the same time, when I read Rumi in English, I think it's great. I think, wow, this cool Western dude named Rumi wrote some cool stuff. I like it. But then when I read Maulana, is what we call him in Iran, in Farsi, it's taken me 25 years to understand what he's talking about. And I'm still learning. I'm still a student. Okay? So we want to be mindful of the fact that these translations are wonderful, but that hopefully we can actually get more accurate translations available, and they're coming, that depict the depth of what a lot of these works are. And through that, you get to learn the language of love. Okay? And that language is what enables us to create unity. So through your support in coming to such programs and wanting more of this material, it actually gives the natives more of a platform to bring you this information with more depth and clarity. So learning the language of love is important. Understanding that polarity is important. It is needed as a path to unity, just like that grain of sand, right? That once started out as a grain of sand, only through time and pressure did it become that precious pearl. Same thing. Rumi teaches us that it's okay to struggle with polarity. And through this process, it's how we actually create unity, not this superficial thing of saying, okay, you know, now we're all going to get along and all is well. It's not like that. It takes a great deal of work to create that. And learning the language of love is definitely an important part of that. And finally, what he teaches us is that this process is actually an alchemical process. It takes time and work to develop this way of thinking and living and feeling and seeing this language of love. It takes time. And I hope to be able to cover that in the future talks with you on the topic of alchemy. Okay, so this was a lot to cover. I know for many of you this was new. For some of you it's not so new, but you're hearing it in a different way, or its application is new. But I'm going to stop this portion of the talk and let you process a little bit and then ask any questions, or if you have any comments, so that I can hear you and engage with you more one-on-one. Okay, Rami.
Thank you so much. This is a wonderful lecture. I'm contemplating, and it's a little hard for me to wear my facilitator or the host hat again and go back to hosting the session. So just bear with me for another minute. The connection you laid out between what Rumi experienced 800 years ago and his poetry and philosophy and what's happening now in our society here nowadays, and the need for unity is absolutely illuminating. I would love to open it to discussion and open it for questions. Before that, I just wanted to give a quick reminder that we have that survey. We would like to hear your feedback and learn about what's important for you so we can cover those topics in our future programs. I am going to put the survey link into the chat box, and in a few minutes I'm going to send out an email. You'll receive this link in your email just in case the chat doesn't work for you. Yeah, before we start our conversation, I'm going to stop recording as I promised earlier so we can have an open and honest conversation here. So here we go. I am stopping the recording now.